He talks about how he wants sycophancy from his administration, from his cabinet. His continued obsession with loyalty above all else stretches to new monumental heights as he talks about the fact that he wants a cabinet to behave like Xi Jinping's staff and that he doesn't want people that butt in the conversations like JD Vance. Listen to this.
I put a 100% tariff on China. As soon as I heard it, within 20 minutes, I put a 100% tariff on China. On President Xi, who's really a friend of mine, as much as he can be a friend. He's a tough man. He's a tough man. Smart man, actually. Very smart. The press doesn't like it when I call him very smart. You know, they think I'm not supposed to call him smart. But he leads 1.4 billion people without question. In fact, during the meeting, we were there. A couple of you were there, and some of you saw it. So he's here, and he's got about 6 people on each side, and every one of those people was standing like this. They were at attention. And I made a comment to one of them, and I got no response. I said, are you going to answer me? I got no response. And President Xi didn't let him have any. So if there's any question, I said, I want my cabinet to behave like that. That's the way. I'm demanding that I want them sitting up like that, Tim, just nice and straight. I never saw posture like that. I've never seen men so scared in their lives. They have the equivalent of a vice president. He was, I said, are you going to answer my question? And he's like, he doesn't move. I said, what's wrong with this guy? I will answer all questions. Why don't you behave like that? JD doesn't behave like that. JD buds into conversations. I want to have that for at least a couple of days, okay, JD? We'll keep you long term, but a couple of days of that would be very, very nice.
You know, this is in a very joking tone, and I could talk about, and I could be cheap and talk about the reports of him saying in private how he wanted a staff that was loyal like Hitler's. But if you look at the people he surrounded himself with, and if you listen to Donald Trump speak at any press conference, or let's say they have a meeting about building a bridge, you know, something mundane, governmental, I mean, that's important work, but you know, what you would expect the government to do. A press conference about, you know, bringing the rate of crime down or something, a press conference about new bagel flavor. It doesn't matter. In those press conferences, listen to the ways that any of those people speak to him, especially if there's a bunch of cabinet people in the same room. It essentially becomes a competition in who can massage his ego most thoroughly and with the most attention to really tending to his deep tissue tension. I mean, whoever can do the best of, Mr. President, you are the greatest president of this lifetime. Mr. President, none of this could have been achieved without your leadership. Mr. President, your leadership is a stalwart inspiration to all Americans. Mr. President, there has never been success on this issue like there is right now in this moment, all because of you. You get some variation of that. And so I really don't know, when Trump jokes about this, what exactly would change when it comes to how the people around him interact with him and to how they interact with the public if they were to have all of the fears and pressures that Trump suggests that Xi's cabinet would. I really don't think that they are that different whatsoever. I actually would not be surprised if Xi's cabinet was chosen on average more for individual competency in the roles that they're serving than those in Trump's cabinet. I mean, Tulsi Gabbard presiding over the presidential daily brief as the top intelligence official in the country, something she's horribly underqualified for and particularly bad at. I mean, if she's bad at splicing information for herself on a war, then it's not surprising that Donald Trump's coming out saying that the troops in Kursk were encircled or being misled or not splicing through important information that he should have prepared for the president to know about. RFK Jr. is kind of a walking example of an explanation in and of itself. Pete Hegseth, you know, he was a grunt, but he has never managed an organization of over 300 people, especially one within the bounds of the Pentagon or the United States military forces. Pam Bondi is probably one that leans with more experience, but still is particularly not that experienced. Steve Witkoff, the Middle East peace envoy and point man on negotiations on diplomatic issues around the world, is a real estate mogul that's his friend from back in the day and has no prior diplomatic experience. And in the areas where we've seen the most success, like, for example, with Israel and Gaza, which still we're seeing bloodshed and we're still seeing aid held up at the border at different points, as is documented by Channel 4 News. Actually, you know what? I think we have that on screen and we can bring that up right here.
Food program has a of aid. What you're looking at is 4,000 tons of aid. That should be in Gaza, but it's not. It's in Jordan. The World Food Programme has another 2 warehouses like this. UNICEF has warehouses like this packed to the gills. The Jordan Hashemite Charitable Organization has 36 warehouses. In fact, all of those groups put together say that they have enough aid for 150 trucks per day, 5 days per week, for 3 months to go to Gaza. But it's not in Gaza, it's still stuck in Jordan. On top of that, they say they have another 10,000 tons of aid ready to come, but they can't get it in here because, well, this place is full. All of the warehouses are full because the Israeli authorities are not letting this aid get through to Gaza. What you're looking at is
So Steve Witkoff is inexperienced. Pete Hegseth is inexperienced. Kash Patel has no experience to be doing what he's doing whatsoever. RFK is inexperienced. I mean, his cabinet is full of largely people who don't know what they're doing, with the most qualified individual probably being Marco Rubio, and funnily enough, probably Pam Bondi, who's also so happens to be, when polled, the least popular cabinet member. I get Kristi Noem, not particularly experienced, but because the bar is so low, the dog capper ends up being on the higher end of the spectrum. But that's just because the median is not particularly fantastic. So again, like, I don't know exactly what would change if you wanted a G-style cabinet when it comes to the issue of loyalty, as Trump references. I mean, just try to watch a press conference, either with the press secretary, Caroline Leavitt, who operates the same way that, I mean, you know, North Korea comparisons are overdone, but she really does speak as the North Korean news broadcaster speaks. She really does proclaim government statements the same way they do. And if I was to imagine how that broadcaster would interact by a Western press that they had to engage with hostilely every day, if they had to give them like 30 minutes of interview time every other day in some press room, she operates exactly how I would imagine that would go. When it comes to just immediate denials, asking questions later, when it comes to just repeating the lie, if it's stated by the president, then it is fact. When it comes to, if they get caught in the lie, just merely never following up, restating it as fact, and then pivoting away, never to pivot back again and revisit the topic. Using bold language as a way to hide from critique, because if you sound confident enough, if you're bold enough, if you say it with so much authority and you put enough government departments in front of it, then it must be true. As we've seen, for example, Trump slowly walk back on the Tylenol thing, slowly walk back, as the science might not be, well, 100% locked down. That's a cute worm, Mako. That little gummy worm we've put in the site chat? I don't think I've seen that before. Truly a thing of beauty. So purty. Okay. Let's move on to the next topic. Actually, you know what? Let's continue on this topic. Let's continue on government incompetency, because this does not just stop at the upper echelons. I think most people know the big names. Kash Patel, and the fact that he messed up the manhunt for the Charlie Kirk shooter so bad that they said after sending them all the way down to Utah to be at the press conference, slowing down information releases. They literally said, do not speak to the press. Do not say anything at the press conference. They literally put him on a muzzle. Because they were scared that he was going to say something that could either compromise the investigation, because he was suggesting that the suspects were caught when they didn't really have the perpetrator, and it was confusing people on the ground and confusing the communication for the people in Utah, or that he would say something that would compromise the prosecution afterwards, as in he would say something like the shooter was here at this time, or the shooter was there at this time when they weren't, and then it would be difficult for a prosecutor to put the guy behind bars, as in Kash Patel might accidentally become the shooter's best friend. And so they had to muzzle him because they were scared that he would mess it up so bad that they would have to let the shooter walk, which it would be hard to imagine it. But the fact that that was a real risk that they had to control for shows his inexperience. And it echoes throughout the entirety of the top of the administration. They all have loyalty in leaps and bounds. Experience is very thin. Remember the first term? Don't worry about Trump. Don't worry about the fact that he's not a man of statecraft, that he doesn't understand some of these governmental concepts very well. The checks and balances might be foreign to him, but he's going to have people around him, a conservative intelligentsia that is going to support him. But second term Trump was that intelligentsia, that's the deep state. That controlled him. That undermined Trump. Don't worry, it won't happen this time before it happens with Pete Hegseth in the middle of Ukraine negotiations. So, one last thing on incompetency, though. It doesn't stop at the top. When you hire administration, it's not just hiring the president. It's not just hiring the president and vice president. It's not just hiring the president, vice president, and the cabinet. It's going for the president, the vice president, the cabinet, and the rest of the bureaucracy under them. The people who are under the cabinet heads, the deputy heads. The people who are under them, the people who are the head of policy, the people who control the money flows, the people who actually manage the hiring and firing at these departments, who can help develop the culture at these departments and the type of human capital that we take and we lose, as we've lost a lot of research capital in the first year of Trump in office, going to other places in Europe where the grants are more prosperous and there's a lot less cutting. And because it's not just electing Donald Trump, when you vote for the presidency, you should think about is voting for the administration. That's why, personally, if Joe Biden ran again, even with concerns around his age, I probably would have voted no. I 100% would have voted for Joe Biden, knowing that even with his problems with age, there's an administration around him that I ultimately think would have been more experienced and much better than Donald Trump. It would manage the country better, would manage our economy better, would manage our foreign policy better, would manage our trade policy better, and I think would manage even our social policy better. But of course, that's my position. It's not everybody's position. And now we have the Trump's administration. And though that goes down into other people as well, and I'm not the only one who's concerned about this. Here is Tom Cotton. He is a senator on the Senate Armed Services Committee. Deals with foreign affairs and issues that could affect the lives of our troops. And he is a Trumper. He is MAGA do or die. He is somebody that gets in the trenches on TV to defend the Trump administration and legislatively votes with Donald Trump almost every single time. And he said that the Pentagon's policy shop, these are the people that were brought in to talk the actual policy under Pete Hegseth, that it is, and I quote, pigpen-like mess. It is a pigpen-like mess. It is a disaster. Senate Armed Services Committee members from both parties questioned DOD missteps, actions that contravene president's foreign policy positions. Can I also just throw out there that this area of responsibility does also fall under the purview of not just Pete Hegseth, but also Elbridge Colby, huge opponent of aid to Ukraine, who has talked a lot about diverting resources meant for Ukraine to a more Asia-focused foreign policy. At the same time, by the way, Pacific Command gets shunned as we deploy more and more military resources to the Middle East, either to bomb the Houthis at such a rate that is unsustainable, or it is to reinforce the Israelis. But again, we need to disengage from Ukraine to support Pacific Command, while Pacific Command continues to be shunned so far in this administration. Well, that area, outside of just having policy disagreements with these people, they seem to just not be that good at their jobs, period. Congress is simmering with discontent with the Pentagon's recent decision making and lack of transparency with its lawfully mandated oversight body, and it boiled over during a routine nomination hearing Tuesday, one of the few venues lawmakers have had to get answers from defense officials since the second Trump administration began in January. Austin Dahmer was ostensibly before the committee to answer questions about how he would tackle the job of Assistant Secretary of Strategy, Plans, and Forces, a job whose title and responsibilities have changed in ways that the committee was only told about on Sunday night. Then that's not even enough time to prepare questions, let alone a reasonable time frame on which to inform the senators of these types of policy changes. Republican Senator Roger Wicker of Mississippi, the committee chairman, said during the hearing, meaning that even the committee chairman only learned about it on Sunday. But because Dahmer had already been performing the duties of another high-level Pentagon official, and because Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had restricted communication between the department and Congress, requiring every interaction to be clear through legislative affairs, a bipartisan group of senators took the opportunity to grill him on a host of recent department moves. And you can go watch this online. It is available. Some of which contained are in direct opposition to President Trump's stated foreign policy positions. Senator Tom Cotton, the Republican from Arkansas we were discussing earlier, listed several. The pause in Ukrainian security assistance. That was done not only once, but twice without the president's know-how, and they tried to do it 4 times, reports suggest. So it's not just a question about whether or not that's a good policy, which obviously the majority of senators don't believe it's good policy, including many in the Republican Party, but it's also bad policy making and bad implementation of policy, because to just freeze randomly, uncoordinated with the office of the president, saying that, oh, we have a shortage of a bunch of equipment, including equipment we don't have shortages of, as they're trying to make a statement and trying to push a narrative to the Russians that, hey, don't drag on this war, it'll just be worse for you. And in the middle of that statement, they freeze aid. What does that say to the Russians? Oh, we can drag this out, we can win. It's something that, even though the chances of negotiations had a very low chance of success, something that continued to undermine negotiations was the inexperience of the negotiators like Steve Witkoff and the inexperience of those who implement policy and manage policy in the rank and file at the Pentagon now that MAGA world has come to town, which has made it so the president doesn't only have to manage his own missteps, he has to manage the missteps of people in the diplomatic process below him, Steve Witkoff, and in the Pentagon and implementation process, Pete Hegseth and Elbridge Colby, those types. I understand that media reports can be wrong, believe me, but it just seems like there's this pigpen-like mess coming out of the policy shop that you don't see from, say, intel and security and acquisition and sustainment. So what he's saying, Tom Cotton, says other government departments like intel and security and acquisitions and sustainment, they don't have these problems. They don't have these problems of waiting to the last seconds to inform you of policy changes. They don't have this problem of not coordinating policy with the White House and informing the legislator of it. They don't have this problem of directly undermining the presidency during these negotiations, because these are locations that got better people in their positions. Because sometimes you get people like Marco Rubio, who you might disagree with, but knows what they're doing. And other times you get FBI directors who should probably be hosting podcasts. Asked why the policy undersecretary's office, led by Elbridge Colby, has been at the center of so many controversies, Dahmer blamed fake news and inaccurate reporting, while claiming ignorance of any details. This decision did not appear to reflect the policy mandated President Trump, Wicker said, of the withdrawal of troops from Romania. Just 2 weeks ago, the president had said that troops would not be withdrawn from Europe. It is unclear to me how the move fits with the commander-in-chief's direction. Again, not only is there a question about coordinating with the presidency, but the Senate is completely left out of the picture, so they don't even know if Trump's silently telling them this. And so it would be better if they actually kept it on the hush-hush. Like, there's no open dialogue, there's no debate, there's no discussion, there's no nothing. Asked about why the decision wasn't coordinated with Congress in any manner, Dahmer claimed the committee had received 3 briefings on the move. During the hearing, Wicker confirmed with the committee staff that no such briefings had occurred. Whoopsie daisy. Are we confusing notifications with briefings? Check on that, will you? Check on that. Dahmer also claimed that both Romania and NATO officials had been briefed on the decision, but couldn't name any single official or when these discussions actually took place. It's the worst defense in the world, man. Oh my God, it's the worst defense in the world since Brazil, Germany, man. It's so terrible. It's so awful, man. Dude, it's 2025. You're using the turtle shell defense, dude. You're just standing. You're getting slaughtered. Somebody throw in the towel. Somebody save my boy, dude. It's not just a question of them not being able to manage it. It's not just a question of them undermining the presidency. They can't even manage a defense of their actions. They can't even manage evidence for any of their claims. And I mean, this is low level, dude. I mean, we see how many times Caroline Leavitt messes up, but then you go down the rank and file and you can see these types of mess ups all the way down the institution, like it's rot seeping into the system. Man, I can't even get a response. The policy office is the worst in the administration, said Senator Dan Sullivan, Republican from Alaska. The other Republican, Lisa Murkowski, is considered the more moderate of the senators from Alaska. This is the much more conservative senator. Man, I can't even get a response, and we're on your team. He's saying, look, friendly, ceasefire. You don't need to leave us out of the picture, too. Sullivan admonished Dahmer and his office for not coordinating with the Committee on National Defense Strategy, a document that only exists because Congress mandated it into law. Where do you think the requirement for the NDS comes from? Yes, it comes from us. Don't you think it would be smart to maybe preview it? I.e., these are reviews that are made. These defense strategy documents are made for Congress to review it, and then they're doing it without coordination with Congress, even though it was Congress who mandated by law for these to be created in the first place so they could be kept in the picture. And in some cases, Wicker pointed out, it appears the policy shop hasn't coordinated with the White House, as we were talking about, as shown by President Trump's surprise upon learning that the administration had paused security assistance to Ukraine in July. Dahmer claimed that there had been no such pause. What? That was a major headline. That was a major headline. Everybody remembers these reports. Everybody remembers that this happened. It's in everybody's clear consciousness that this was something that did happen. That there was an aid freeze, and that the aid freeze was done and announced by the Pentagon before later being withdrawn by the administration at a later date. This was public knowledge. It was a major headline, and it was the Pentagon themselves that announced it. So unless the Pentagon announced it, did not implement it, and then retracted it, and that's what they mean by, oh, there was never any aid freeze. But that would not mean that there was never any aid freeze. That would mean that there was never any implementation of the aid freeze, not that there was never any aid freeze. Either way, this is not only a lie, this is a lie that, like, the top AI search result on Google is immediately going to sniff out. This is a lie that Grok or just Yahoo Answers, Ask Jeeves. Okay, I don't care what system you want to bust out
immoral,
here.
Morally corrupt,
This falls upon basic inspection. General Mark, thank you so much for the tier 1 sub for 33 months. Dude, this entire article is a mess. I kind of want to finish it, actually. You know what? We're going to finish it right now. Sullivan admonished Dahmer in his office for not coordinating with the committee on the National Defense Strategy. A document only exists because Congress mandated it. My impression today is you cloaked your testimony in a veil of ignorance. You don't know what's happening in many different cases, when in fact, you were basically the stand-in and surrogate for Secretary Colby, Senator Jack Reed, Democrat from from RI. I don't know what RI is supposed to mean. Rhode Island. I'm an idiot. The committee's ranking member told Dahmer. Again, as the number 2 in policy, what were you doing? Reed also asked about the change to Dahmer's own prospective job title. The job had long been called Assistant Secretary for Strategy, Plans, and Capabilities. That's what the department's website still says, and it's how the nominee was introduced at the confirmation briefing. But Dahmer responded to pre-hearing questions using the title of Assistant Secretary for Strategy, Plans, and Forces, reflecting an October 8th OSD memo ordering up that change and others. Reed said the change was described to him as cosmetic, even though it directs a reorganization that moves 3 deputy assistant secretaries under Dahmer's prospective office. Okay, so it's aesthetic, but he gets 3 people under him. 3 deputy assistant secretaries. Doesn't seem aesthetic. If somebody said, hey, Dylan, your new title is no longer war correspondent offbeat research, it's management of operations. Nothing changes except you have 3 new subordinates. No, something changed. Normally, when the department conducts such a reorganization, it will send to the committee a summary of those changes for a review and consideration before the committee proceeds with the nomination. This is important because the Senate has a constitutional duty to advise and consent on all Senate-conferred nominees. As such, having a basic understanding of a nominee's duties is imperative to our oversight role. Unfortunately, that did not happen in this case. Dahmer said he took responsibility for the late notification and the lack of consultation with the committee. He said the Pentagon's Office of Legislative Affairs should have reached out, and it was his responsibility as a policy deputy to make sure that happened. Lawmakers have stopped short of levying any threats against the department, though, as Senator Tim Kaine, Democrat from Virginia, pointed out, they have made clear the unseriousness with which they regard the current chain of command in one regard. Neither the House nor the Senate version of the draft National Defense Authorization Act includes a statutory charge of the Defense Department's name to the War Department. Change to the War Department, despite the administration's insistence on using what amounts to an official nickname without congressional approval. As far as I'm concerned, there's no effort for Congress to make the name change. The president did this by executive order, but acknowledged it would take a congressional authorization, and it was an alternative name. I view it as a form of political cosplay. Cosplay isn't my thing, but to each his own. Now, this is true that the next president can immediately say it is not the Department of War. They can change the placards that they changed at the Pentagon back, and that can be that because there was no congressional approval. It's the same problem with the tariffs, where Donald Trump can try to create this entire system of tariffs based upon his executive orders and his emergency declarations. But if that all can be undermined by a rug pull, by, say, either a Supreme Court decision or one election that undermines the entire system, who is going to be the investor building factories in Ohio based upon the 10 to 15 to 20% tariff rate that could be undermined either by the Supreme Court, which currently does not seem too hyped about the idea of allowing the president to implement the largest tariffs in American history at his own whim without the consultation of Congress? Kind of goes against a lot of basic American principles that started this country in the first place, okay? We started a lot more over a tax on tea. It took a lot less. So I think that Donald Trump wants to move through and burrow through as fast as possible with his policy changes. So some of this anger is by design, to try to go through and reform before the system can react, as was the case with those deportations, as they ignore court orders to not deport people who had do not deport orders, to not deport women to men's prisons in South America, as we hear the President of the United States talk about deporting American citizens to foreign prisons. I think some of this is by design, but I also think a lot of this is due to inexperience. A lot of this is due to people who thought they were hot shit, start engaging with the bureaucracy, start engaging with actual responsibilities. And, you cannot just email and say, hey, can we wait another week on that report? No, this is the office of the highest land in all. I mean, this is the strongest office in all of the land. This is Congress. This is one of the most powerful institutions on the planet. You have to cross your I's and dot your T's. And it seems that the MAGA squad, okay, that barreled out of the clown car was not up to snuff. And now, this isn't something that just Democrats are calling out. This is something that even their own allies are calling out. As they said as a Republican senator said, we're on your team.